I'm good.
I don't know how much easier we can make it for you.
Okay, we're live.
Sorry, we're just talking about the limelight.
We're all up here just talking about the limelight.
Stay there, it's really nice.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. For those of you who are in our listening audience tonight or watching us on cable or will watch us later, please join us on the 15th. I think the events all start around 5, probably well before then, for the grand opening of the Limelight and the ice skating rink with Paul Wiley going to be skating. And some of us had the opportunity to participate and enjoy the Limelight this past weekend. Needless to say, well done. All the staff needs a huge pat on the back. Our staff really pushing through to get the CO completed and for their staff to get it ready for a soft opening. So we got a lot of work yet to do. Let's give them college cheers. You see any of the staff down there working, please thank them. Many of them have gone 15, 20 days without a break. So with that said, I will call the GID meeting to order. It's 4:03. Rhonda, you want to do roll call?
Butler,
Here.
Circus,
Here.
Mattson,
Here.
Shank,
Here.
and Good.
Here.
Okay, the first item on the agenda, and this will be a resolution, and this is Snowmass Village GID, District Number 1, Town of Snowmass Village, Colorado. Resolution number 3, Series of 2018, a resolution levying general property taxes for year 2019 for general operating expenses of the Snowmass Village GID District Number 1 for the Town of Snowmass Village for the 2019 budget year. And with that, I'll call the GID board into listening to the presentation from Mary Ann.
Okay, so resolution number 3 adopts the mill levy for the general improvement district for 2019 property tax collections. If you recall, during the budget process, we pointed out that the GID is primarily funded by these property taxes, but that the expenditures continue to exceed the revenues in this fund as Base Village continues to build out. And it mainly supports the snow melting of Lower Carriageway and the Sky Cab operations.
So, Mary Ann, you mentioned that expenses exceed revenues and has been for some period of time, maybe forever. And although the assessed values were decreased, the mill levy stayed essentially the same. And I'm putting those two things together and suggesting that there's no change to the mill levy because expenses still exceed revenues.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mary Ann? Do I have a motion for the approval of GID resolution number 3 on page 3?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Further dialogue, questions? All in support say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. Let's move on for minutes. These are minutes. This is the GID regular meeting minutes for approval. This is on November the 12th of 2018. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a change on my own minutes.
Okay, you have a change. This is substantive.
Well, it's just on page 7 of 7, it says the GID minutes were approved December 10th, and it should be a 0 instead of a dash.
Yes.
2018.
Okay. With that technical change, I don't see anything relevant to what occurred in the discussion. So with that minor change, all in support say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. Is there any further business to come forward to the GID board? If not, motion for adjournment.
Motion?
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
Did
Second.
you say go home? Did you say? Oh, I thought you meant the whole meeting.
Okay, all in support? Aye.
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 Opposed, same
Aye.
side. Okay. Okay. Pardon?
I just need a minute to get this meeting closed.
Okay, we're going to take 2 minutes so Rhonda can adjust the tape. Okay. Thank you, Rhonda. I will now call to order the regular meeting of town, no, this is a special meeting of town council. That's December the 10th. And Rhonda, do you want to go ahead and do roll call?
Butler,
Here.
Circus,
Here.
Mattson,
Here.
Shank,
Here.
good.
Here.
Do I have anyone in the public that would like to come forth and make any statements over any issues this evening? If not, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Draft agendas, then there's a resolution regarding the one-year deadline from preliminary plan resolution approval on January 2. And this is the enclave, if you will. And with that said, I'll see if there is a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Anybody want anything pulled out? Look at your, can you all quickly look at your draft agendas, and can you look to make sure of your attendance very quickly? Our next meeting is on the 17th. Bob, you're out, correct?
That's right.
Okay, then Bill, you're out on the 22nd. Any other people have?
I will be out sometime in February. I don't have the date yet. I'm not sure. It might be the work session February 11th or the 19th. I'm not, I have to check my calendar.
Okay,
Be one of those two dates.
okay. And then the calendar is forever. I don't even know what spring brings. So please make sure we let Rhonda know, so, and team, so we can plan accordingly all these agendas. Okay, any questions on, I don't really have anything to say about the resolution. Did anyone else for?
For resolution number 30,
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
You're, everybody fine?
I just had a question about comprehensive plan, and it just says, once adopted pursuant to its policies, code amendments may be adopted within the next year, could conceivably affect the enclave proposal. Can you tell us a little bit about what those changes?
It's conceptual, honestly. We wanted to make sure the council was aware and the applicant was aware that with the next step after a comp plan adoption is generally a land use code review, and we wanted everybody to know that those codes would be coming up before the council, but we have nothing in particular planned at this point.
Okay.
Mostly
You
heads
okay?
up.
You okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I had the same question you had. Okay, if there's no further questions for the planning commission, Mike Hoffman, the attorney, is here. Gus is here, representing the architect. Well, you guys aren't even going to have to speak, it looks like. So all in support of the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
Julian's.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Come over frequently. I'll see you on December 15th, hopefully down at the opening of Base Village. The rentals are free, by the way. So,
Which is nice.
yeah, really, really nice. Okay, what we're going to do now is turn to administrative reports, and Mary Ann continues to sit in the wonderful seat because it's that time of the year that we have to approve all the general property taxes for the year 2019 to help defray the cost of government for the town of Snowmass Village and to pay general obligation bond principal interest related costs, and for the town's road improvement program and the Aspen School District for 2019. Mary, I'm going to ask you to kind of walk through this a little bit, because people in the audience probably want to know how it's going to impact them and their respective property, which you've done a very nice job of outlining here. So, you go
Sure,
ahead, please.
The mill levy is decreasing from 8.809 to 8.494 mills, and that is mostly due to the payoff of the swimming pool bonds in 2018. We no longer have that payment for next year. The total assessed value for the town is going up by 1.26%. And if you have $1 million of actual value of property, your taxes are going to go down by $22.68. And if you have $1 million of commercial property actual value, your property taxes are going to go down by $91.35 per million.
And that's town.
And that's for the town,
And that's not all the taxing districts, that's the town's effect on the tax bill.
correct?
Any questions for Mary Ann? You can buy a pizza with that.
Buy more than a pizza,
Depends on what size.
the house,
Oh,
$10 million house, you might be able to buy. Several.
yeah, several pizzas. They have the party for the town. Yeah.
Marianne, we have under number 2 that the general obligation bonds for the Drosty conservation easement. I thought that the Drosty was paid off in this last year.
We did a bond issue for the original Drosty conservation easement. How was that, 20 years ago or so? Yeah, and so we're just getting ready to pay off those bonds in 2019. Those will go away, but the other one was our contribution to Pickens County's purchase of the Sky Mountain Park. And that was a 5-year obligation that we did to get that paid off.
And that was paid off.
Before we started that was what, 2017?
That 2 years ago, one was paid off. This is the second set of bills that is getting paid off this upcoming year.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah. That was the first set.
Sorry.
It's the first set, which was a longer term. The second set has already been paid off.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's still, this is the prior one,
Well, Mike,
it's there.
So one is for the easement and the other one is for Sky Mountain Park?
Exactly. And the older one is the easement, which still continues.
So it still continues until,
The last payment is in
Done.
2019, then that will
Yeah.
drop off.
okay, gotcha.
So any other questions? Anyone? Okay. Do I have a motion for approval of resolution number 38?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 38, series 2018.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alyssa. Any further questions? All in support, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. And Mary Ann, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is Brush Creek Faraway Crossing discussion. And, hi there, Ann, how are you?
I'm good.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, we're ready, and
You go there. You can, I should give this, I guess so. Sorry.
and do you want to set the stage for why this, can you do the whole history and
Yes.
stuff? And
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So Ann Martins, Public Works Director, good evening. We're here to discuss, one of the budgeted items that we have in the 2019 budget is continuing with the improvement projects on Brush Creek Road, which was identified as a council goal to work on those crossings. And as we wrap up Town Park Station, we'll be moving on to the projects for 2019. And so we've done some initial review of the crossings. The budget had approved to do design and hopefully some implementation of the Brush Creek Road and Sinclair Road. After initial conversations, as well as I think you've also received some public comment on some of the other intersections, we took a look at the transit usage and the recommendation of improvements with considering which ones already have crosswalks and which ones don't, and we're looking at seeing if there's consensus to move forward with going on the design on the Faraway Road and Brush Creek Road. And so basically that's what my memo discussed. Attached to the memo is a summary of some data that David Peckler, the Transportation Director, had pulled together, which I can let David describe it further, but in general, basically it shows the intersections and took into account RAFTA, the town of Snowmass shuttle, as well as the data from the school district, and basically he needed to go through and kind of meld the data that he had available for today's discussion.
We're talking about crosswalks. Do you have the data for how many people cross the street?
We do have some traffic count information. David's got that.
Okay. I saw it for number of people get on the bus, but
Right. So we
crossing
didn't
the street.
we didn't include all that because we don't have the most recent traffic crossings for pedestrians, but we do have some data that we can shed some light on. So if you want to talk about the transportation side of it.
We have some data on when we did some turning movement analysis for Faraway, Owl Creek, Brush Creek, Wood Road, and Highline Wood Road. But it's 2015, I believe, is the last sort of detailed study done when we picked up Owl Creek and Faraway intersections with Brush Creek. The CCP plan came out after that, the Community Connectivity Plan, which looked at the intersections in greater detail with the benefit of our consultants making some recommendations on improvements to those intersections, so we haven't studied them since. The reason we looked at the bus passengers is every bus passenger starts out as a pedestrian. So one way or another, whether they're getting on or getting off the bus, the bus passenger, the bus rider is a pedestrian. So those pickups and drop-offs on those roadways indicate the activity that can be associated at that pedestrian movement across that intersection. What you have is basically RAFTA, they're all data from March of 2018. We didn't want to pick Easter Sunday, so we didn't go for Christmas, New Year's. We just said, what's a average weekday in March? And so what you have is an on-off. RAFTA acknowledges when a person gets on a bus and when a person gets off a bus. So you have an on-off for RAFTA. In our case, we only count boardings on our bus. We don't count alightings. So our data is in the on column. And then the school district counts children when they get on the bus and where they're scheduled to get off the bus. So you have the school district data in the on-off locations. Basically, it's showing you of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intersections we studied. You have the percentage of the total for each one. Obviously, the rodeo lot becomes one of the bigger pedestrian generating crossings based on transit, boarding, and alighting. That's about 30%. The Snowmass Center is about 28%. Faraway Road's 14.5 roughly, followed by Owl Creek at 12. Then it's 8 for Sinclair, 6% for Creekside, and Meadow Road is about 1%.
David, so I'm looking at the chart, and it appears to me that if the first column is Snowmass, the Snowmass bus, what goes on, right? And then the second column is RAFTA, on and off?
No. Actually, you should just scratch that on It should be just on column and off column. There is no on, off, and the second column. So RAFTA's numbers are in both the on column and the off on column. Sorry about that. But our data is only in the on column, and the school district is in the on column and the off on column. But again, there's no on the second column. My apologies.
Okay, it's on, off, and total.
So, just looking at the Snowmass Center, because I'm trying to understand how this works. So if 305 people would get off at the Snowmass Center,
It's a phenomenon.
but only 62 people
It's a
get on.
phenomenon you're seeing because of Base Village and the way RAFTA routes. So if you've ever watched in the morning, RAFTA will stop on the uphill side of the Upper Kearns, and
Yeah.
about 20 people get off.
Get off.
And then they'll walk across. Now, in the evening, they catch the bus inside the Base Village station. So they're an off, but they don't really come back down to Conoco to get back on.
So we don't have the Base Village station on this.
No, you don't have Stonebridge. We were focusing on Brush
Okay,
Creek Road.
okay. Well, then, yeah, so we don't really get a chance to see that because we don't have the Base Village station as part of the, this chart,
Correct.
right? So we don't get, the Base Village station theoretically would look just the opposite. A lot of people getting on, very few people getting off.
Which it does
Okay,
in the RAFTA data.
okay. But that's the only one that, is that the only stop that seems to be, from your experience, that seems where people either get on or get off at a different stop and pedestrian it to get to where they want to go?
I would say it's the one that's, really lopsided.
Okay.
And it's particularly just the routing of RAFTA up the outside road, down the inside road. And you can either choose to ride the bus up to the mall, wait, and then come down, or you just get off at the center and walk across.
And walk across.
So David, the Faraway Road one seems to be pretty balanced in regards to off and on, which leads us to believe that this is a pretty good conversation with direction we're going in here for a crosswalk.
The main point, I mean, David mentioned this, town shuttle only does boarding numbers, so you're not seeing the departure numbers there. So,
Lighting number.
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
the real thing is the reason we included this was just to give you a comparison of what activity is going on Brush
But the
Creek
school
Road.
bus.
School bus numbers included.
Right,
So we included as much data as we could.
because with the school bus, they get on at the bus stop.
Yep.
And they get off on the
Other
other
side.
side
Yeah,
of the
side.
road, the north side of the road.
No, they don't. They come back around and they stop at 410.
I'm sorry, I don't know that. That's
Yes,
what
I
I'm
know that quite well.
But I have seen the school bus stop over there. And
Yeah, they stop there for people that are in Seasons 4 and Woodbridge and
Okay.
what have you. And some kids decide they want to get off there and walk
the
across.
bus goes up,
Except
around,
if-
round,
Yes,
and
and
comes
then,
back.
then it stops at Faraway.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I live coming down Faraway, and so does Bob. You don't see a lot of people crossing the intersection there. Where the biggest problem, really, in terms of safety, for me, is Sinclair Road in Meadow. Faraway has a nice stoplight. If it's dark outside, it lights that intersection. But Sinclair and Meadow, personal experience coming home late at night, people in dark clothes, there's not good lighting there. They run across that intersection, and if you're not really watching it, to me, that's the most
Well,
dangerous intersection. And if I had to spend town money,
I'll just go by what the data here is
well,
saying.
that's only on and off bus.
Personal observation of people going up and down that stretch of road from far away to the center. And then also just thinking about the density of the multifamily complexes that are in Snowmass Mountain, Seasons 4, and Woodbridge that are using Woodbridge Road to access mass transportation, then also daily townhomes, the Timbers Employee Housing Complex. There's a lot of density in that location.
I'm more in favor of Sinclair. If I had to spend whatever the number is, design, I see Sinclair as a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, I think, I agree with you to the effect of on where the pedestrian path is and the bike path, the way it goes in front of the Blue Roofs is, we all know that needs improvement, because it's kind of hairy right there. But I haven't seen a lot of people crossing the street late at night there, so I don't know.
Yeah, there are people that, well, I do. Needless to say, it's getting darker earlier. So there are employees that pop off the bus, or the skiers that come across and they need to get over to Seasons 4, or then they walk down towards where the chapel and all that is. That's where I see it. And then heading to the Blue Roofs.
Well, they can get off by the chapel. The bus stop is right there on the right. Where
At
Owl
Owl-
Creek and,
At Owl Creek Road, yes.
Yeah, but I'm talking, the bus is heading uphill.
correct, and they can get off to the right.
They get off there and then walk across the street.
At Owl Creek and Brush Creek, yes.
No, well, I really want to talk about Sinclair. That's that uphill piece that you have to go over the ridge. That's where
Can't see people.
Excuse me.
you cannot see people there.
Well, you can't see them because of the hill.
That's exactly.
I mean, basically, in my opinion, every single crossing on Brush Creek is dangerous for its own reason. I mean, I told Ann when I saw it the other night, there's nothing that makes me happier than coming into Snowmass and going through Town Park and being able to see people now. It has made a huge difference.
You can't see people at Sinclair.
No, but none of those intersections, they're all dangerous. I mean, I understand Faraway might be a little bit more lit, but, we did get an email from one of the homeowners who has kids, and there's several other people. And I think that they all need our attention for different reasons.
You're correct. I mean, the Sinclair Road that you're referring to, especially if you're leaving Snowmass, you're coming up the hill, you can't really,
You can't
till you
see.
get to the crest of the hill, between cars coming at you. And same thing if you're coming into Snowmass, you can't quite, that little gully, you can't quite see who's
there-
coming.
Can't see them.
Is there some sort of, I don't even know if this exists, Ann, but some sort of sensor that knows when people are crossing that you could put further, like, so that if you're coming, you're like, let's say you're leaving here and you're going that way, that you would know that there's people in a crosswalk that are gonna be coming up?
You can, look at Sinclair intersection, that currently has a crosswalk, and yes, it has that vertical curve in there. You could install, there's a pre-warning sign as you come up the hill that's not illuminated.
Right.
It just says that there's a crosswalk as you're approaching it. You could connect that to a crosswalk signal so that it would, pre-warning and at the intersection.
Because I feel like even if you did something, lit up the crosswalk there, it's still, you're coming up that hill, so you really don't know that there's people there.
There is a street light there, but I'll tell you, it does not illuminate that street,
Yeah.
right at that point, that choke point. That's the one that's,
I mean, there's one solution, and this was Clint and I were just talking about it, is we do have road fund dollars established next year to do a large amount of overlays, and one of them is Brush Creek Road. I mean, we could come back and authorize the
You just transfer.
transfer, do the design dollars for, change the scoping of the project to do the design dollars for Sinclair and Faraway. So we're not having this conversation, we're just moving forward on both those improvement projects.
Are there some economies of scale by doing both of those at the same time?
Not really in the sense, because you're gonna do, legwork on both of them. Yeah, not really.
I guess
But it
the point I was
accomplished.
trying to make is if the debate is which one, this is one of those nice spots we don't have to choose. We went with one to begin with in the budget because we thought we were kind of trying to make incremental improvements. Upon further analysis, with the data that David's got, one point that got brought up with Faraway is probably the widest part of Brush Creek. I think we determined that was the most lanes, and so between the alightings and boardings, the width, we said, you know what, we should switch this to Brush Creek, which was the impetus for tonight's discussion. If the observation is, hey, Sinclair is still important, we can rearrange some dollars and do both, but we wanted to kind of stay with the theme of incremental improvements. But if there's support for design for both, we could do that as well.
And is it possible to put in our existing lamppost at Sinclair a stronger light, like these LEDs that we just put down
Yeah.
at Town Park seem to be much brighter than other streetlights that we've had.
So when we looked at Town Park Station, we looked at the foot candles and what that light array is on the ground to get a better pattern. Sinclair currently has a light, Faraway currently has a light. I mean, that's the standard, is putting one light in there, but we could look at the fixtures to see if there's a better, fixture to help illuminate it.
Yeah, because, as Marky said, the light at Faraway seems to throw much better light across Brush Creek than does the light at Sinclair. Now, maybe it's location, maybe it's the width of the
Further
road
back, yeah.
at that particular point, but, or it could be the foot candle power. I mean, or a combination.
Combination of things, yeah. So, I mean, that's what we're looking at tonight. We're not coming back and saying what the design is. We want to move forward on design, and that's where we started looking at the users, the amount, the width of the roadway, the transit users, and that's why we were coming up this conversation. Do you want us to switch our direction from Sinclair to Faraway?
Yeah, I don't see as many people crossing at Faraway. I mean, we're using bus counts, people getting on and off a bus versus pedestrians crossing. I see more pedestrians at Sinclair going to work and coming home at night. I mean, Brian
Well-
may have better data, but I don't know what he's got.
I mean, that might be true, but the bottom line is that is a major school bus intersection. And I think first and foremost, that should be at the top of the list because of that, in my opinion.
Far away, you're saying?
What?
Far away?
Yeah,
Just to confirm. that.
Kids
Yeah.
don't really cross there.
they do cross.
Why do they cross?
They cross because they don't want to stay on the bus to go up and around. They cross. I mean, I've seen them crossing.
I think it's a very, I agree with Alyssa. I think it
And
should
even
be a
if-
priority. It's as David said, the density in there between all
Well,
the,
there is density.
it's a very busy.
When you have an
place.
employee housing unit right there with lots of kids, and you just have, you have a lot of families.
No,
more
and going down Valley, like when you're coming out of the canyon or you're coming into the canyon, I know this is triggered by the street light there at Old Snowmass Conoco. If you're doing the speed limit, and all of a sudden that flashing light comes on, you know
That's
the
that
light's gonna
pre-warning
turn
sign.
red on you,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if that could be, for Sinclair, that would be the ideal thing if, if there was a pedestrian in the crossing, and if there was a place to hit a button on both leaving town and coming into town, if that warning flashing I can't see it being that obtrusive to people that it's not gonna be on all the time, it's just when somebody's crossing the street. Is that something that's?
That's what Alyssa was alluding to, is kind of like that pre-warning sign.
Right.
With the smart technology, it would be connected by a Bluetooth.
Well, then you look at the application that Aspen has as you go into town.
The pedestrians.
Yeah, pedestrian, they don't have medians or anything, they just have like we have at Town Park
At Town
Station.
Park Station.
Yeah, where you hit the button.
I mean, it is, I think, state law that a person in a painted crosswalk, right, has the right of way and traffic's supposed to stop, right? So right now, we don't even have that in either of these,
Sinclair does have a
Intersections.
Sinclair does have a crosswalk.
and I haven't noticed it in a long time.
You gotta slow down a little bit.
Well, when there's snow on the ground, you can't see it.
And there's crosswalk signs. So the crosswalks that are there, that are in place, we always make sure we do the striping, and we always make sure we do the crosswalk signage that follows MUTCD. What we're talking about is enhancing those intersections. Faraway does not have a crosswalk.
Well, I think,
And I gotta say, I looked at the proposed design from a number of years ago. And in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, the crosswalk's in the totally wrong place.
We don't disagree. We put those in there just as examples of ideas that have
Right.
been discussed, and that's why we said just, these are some past ideas, but future design needs to happen.
Well, I mean, so my question really is, what kind of feedback do you want from us
We want to make
in
sure that we
terms
can,
of, before you start to go to design?
We just want to make sure we're focusing our efforts on the right intersection. What had been put in the budget for 2019 was Sinclair, and we're recommending that we refocus my efforts and the town's efforts on Faraway. But if that's not what the decision of the council is, we'll stay with what's in the budget.
So all you really want to know is what intersection?
Yeah,
But we can do both.
we could, we threw out
Where are
an
you gonna
option
get the
tonight.
money? Where's the money coming from?
So we have road fund dollars for road improvements that we could, instead of doing some of those overlay projects, do some of the design work in there.
What overlay projects did you have? What-
We had Brush Creek Road, from Meadow to Sinclair. And we had, I
You
think
had
Meadow.
Stellar Lane,
Sorry?
you had Stellar.
Yes, we had a section of Stellar.
Uh-huh.
And then we had a, overlay, I think, on Meadow Road. The Meadow Road, the cul-de-sac section. And I can't remember the other ones. Sorry. It was a large number. We had a large amount of improvements because we didn't do very many overlays this year. We just had a patch down at the roundabout.
I would be in favor of doing both. I think our road overlays are maybe a little excessive, and this would be a good place to reallocate some of those dollars. I think the intersection that we just completed down at Town Park is great. I think those blue lights are also a big improvement. The biggest thing that I notice is actually getting people to push the button when they cross the street. But other than that, it's a vast improvement. I think we can do a lot better at Faraway and at Sinclair. Brian, do you have any information about incidents, or what's your experience at those intersections?
I do have some data from 2010 and present. Accidents, there was 21 accidents in the last 8 years at that intersection.
Which one,
Which
Brian?
one, Sinclair?
I'm sorry, no, at Faraway, and I did not do Sinclair. I know that it would be much less than that. Faraway is just a tricky intersection, coming down that hill with speed and trying to turn into Faraway, or coming off of Faraway with a little bit too much energy, bringing you out into Faraway, out into Brush Creek Road is a constant issue. We've cited over the same period 21 citations for speed, and only anecdotally can I assess those numbers and say that that's a pretty busy intersection. All of our intersections are going to have some crash data. That's typically where people have
I mean,
problems.
your citations were for people coming down or going up?
At the intersection, period.
Okay,
So
so
there,
you don't
it's
have
identified more than
downhill
likely it's a Brush Creek violation, not a Faraway, and it's probably coming down the hill. I do have speed data. You know, the speed limit there is 30. 85th percentile is about 37 miles an hour. That's collectively up and down. Going down, it's more like 30, 38, 39. So they're almost pushing 40 coming down the hill. You know, we tolerate that because it's almost 5 lanes across. There's so much asphalt there that people just naturally feel more comfortable getting up to speeds. All of our crash data is winter. There's no
Yeah, because
summertime
when you
crash
slide-
data at
slide-
all.
Slide into
so
the traffic.
it's all weather related for the most part. You know, anecdotally, I put out to my staff what their thoughts were on the Faraway intersection, and I got resounding comments on the school bus traffic, that the kids are manipulating the school bus stops and running across the road after the bus stops. I know there was a comment about the fact that we follow the school bus, but we don't get out in that intersection. We don't get out of the car. For one, it wouldn't be safe for an officer to stand in that road any better than it would be a pedestrian, because it's so wide and the speeds coming down the hill are just unsafe for anybody to be standing there. So the officer behind the bus has a role to follow the bus, not to manage any pedestrian crossing at that stop. We We go through that intersection, 5, 6 times an hour, 3 hours a day and night. Over my entire career, it's a busy intersection. There's a lot of pedestrians that cross at Faraway Road. At nighttime, you'll see groups of 15 people coming out of Woodbridge who are all renters. And how do you get to Aspen? You got to take the downhill bus stop. And they all run across the road, and the lighting is no one's been hit yet, but it's a long way to try to cross. Sinclair, definitely, I think I agree with everyone that should be on the list as well, but that's 2 lanes of traffic with 2 bus stops, where Faraway is literally 4 lanes of traffic, and can be a 5th if you add the north bus stop. So it's a mile across. It's a lot of asphalt to try to get across one way or the other, and it's a pretty big challenge. And creating some safety islands for people to make it to before they decide to cross the next lane would increase that. And also that traffic furniture would just naturally reduce those speeds that are now approaching 40. As you start to narrow the road, it's going to naturally bring that back down closer to 30 where it deserves to be. And just negotiating the narrow roads, that will be a fix on its own. So obviously both intersections need our help, but there is some significant traffic at Faraway going both directions all times of the day.
A question for you relative to the islands. Snow melt. Is the thought to put snow melt on those islands? Or they'll ice up in the wintertime?
No, I don't think so. And we're seeing the success in below the roundabout right here. People at least, actually above and below, and I don't think that's snow melted. It's just you have a 3-foot space to take safety while you're making a decision to cross the next lane, and you're not having to, think to yourself that you've got 2 directional traffic. And that traffic that comes up from below Faraway Road, that curve right there, if someone's doing 35 miles an hour, they come around that corner pretty quick, and they're in the intersection relatively quickly. That line of sight's not quite as good. So having a spot to kind of hang to make your next decision, I think it's working really, really well above and below the Conoco roundabout. That's a great success for people and sometimes you don't see somebody in the intersection right away because you're watching the roundabout, and boom, suddenly they've made it to an island and they're in a safe spot. So that's been a success.
Yeah, I think all these intersections do a great job of slowing people down, and Town Park's a great example. I mean, before we had that narrowed up, people just used to fly through there. So I think reducing the speed on the road, making it safer for our pedestrians, I'd be in favor of doing both Sinclair and Faraway. But I do agree with Bob. I think that at least this diagram, this Faraway crosswalk seems to be too far uphill. I think it should be on the corner. But from this drawing, it makes it look like there's no place for a pedestrian island because you have that turning lane.
Well, if you put it on the downhill side, Bill, you put it on the downhill, by the downhill bus stop side, and that way you walk behind the bus when you get off the bus, and you cross almost directly across the street to the downhill side, and that's where the sidewalk is. There's no sidewalk on the uphill side.
Right.
Right.
And I don't know, anybody think that the Timbers Club is gonna put the sidewalk in?
So, just remember, I just included these just for discussion purposes.
I understand.
We agree, we have had internal conversations on what the solution is and how that all fits.
I understand.
And it didn't take into account topography, because as you know, there's the water feature there and all that, so that's what the design part will be for.
There's even less lanes of traffic on the downhill side.
The other bold discussion we had, and again, this will happen through design, is do you put a crosswalk on the uphill and the downhill side so that you can accommodate seasons for Woodbridge? Those are kind of things that would be worked through in design, but we wanted to get the initial question answered of which intersection to design for first. And if the answer is both, we'll find a way to do that. Just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page going forward.
But does the downhill crosswalk provide you with a place to put that pedestrian island?
So we talked about that turn lane, and we'd have to consider how we do this. this image doesn't show it the best, but basically, we've got an aerial photo that shows actually the turning movements of the vehicles. I mean, it's very obvious where the vehicles are turning. And it's allows that to come up a little bit further. So we want to play with some of those options.
Okay, good.
And then we'll come back with those, so everybody's familiar with what we're looking at, but there's options.
So I think there's consensus to move forward
Okay.
With,
with
Far
both.
away.
With
With
both?
both?
mm-hmm,
Okay.
yes.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time.
If we were gonna do, any kind of improvement on the Sinclair Brush Creek, I think it's time to start talking again about that pedestrian path and making that safer at the same time. Because you're so exposed and walking in front of the blue roofs, if somebody's texting or something coming down the hill, I've been almost hit several times through the years on that one section when I used to run.
So we have cursory started looking at some options out there, and I've been watching what's going on in other communities, and we've got some ideas that we may test out and do kind of like pilots to see how they work, delineator type of things.
Well, even if it was a raised walkway or something to get people off of the road, so there's an obvious there's a difference between the road and the
Grade
pedestrian
separation,
path,
yeah.
because on a snowy day, you shouldn't be walking out there anyway, until the plows come, but summertime, there's a very active
It's a very active,
And it's
Path.
one of our quarter.
between
Pathways,
biking and,
yeah.
and walking, it's a very active path.
with
And,
a lot of ice on it.
and your alternative is to take the Blue Roof's driveway through to avoid it. And I think I think it's time that the town, if we're going to do any kind of improvement on that intersection, it's time to start talking about improving the pedestrian safety of the whole walkway, besides crossing the street at the same time. Bike path or walking path, whatever you want to
And
call
you
it.
need to solve the snow problem, the ice problem that builds up out there. I've followed more than once on that walkway.
We could just melt it, get some more boilers and stuff.
You guys have endless budget dollars for me.
Okay.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is a regulatory framework for retail marijuana stores in Snowmass Village.
Good
So you want to
afternoon.
go ahead, Travis?
Yeah, so just a week ago, we were discussing this draft regulatory framework for licensing marijuana stores in Snowmass Village. After our discussion on Monday, we discussed a few additional concepts, but the outline that we resubmitted for your packet today is largely unchanged. And so we basically just wanted to continue that discussion, and we're looking for council direction on whether or not that outline as written is good to go, sufficient for us to begin drafting official code language for your review and approval at a later date.
Okay,
So,
what
yeah.
my thought would be was we have basically a page and a half of detail in terms of what we were thinking, and then we go into zoning and location restrictions. Are you ready to move into zoning and district overlay, or is there questions on the first part?
No, we've done the zoning and district
right.
overlay.
Well,
We're-
oh,
we're-
I'm sorry.
Haven't we?
Well, I have some questions.
Okay, well then you take
You
it
wanna
from there.
Jeez, calm down. The thing that I wanted to bring up is over on page 31. And I'm looking at the diagrams. And I think of this issue relative to, we spent a lot of time talking about the mall. Does this diagram also pertain to the Snowmass Center area, the Kearns Road area? Travis?
Are we talking about this diagram?
Yep.
The different zone districts?
Yep.
Yes, it would.
Okay, so this does include the
So
center.
That's just to illustrate that
Okay,
the zone districts and PUDs and this new marijuana district overlay are separate layers.
the reason why I'm asking, we got into the conversation last week and told that we couldn't discuss it, but we all know what I'm talking about. And we put the Upper Kearns area back into the district, and Bill talked about pulling the lower Kearns area out. My real issue is, and I'll just say it, is that lower Kearns area, coming down that is a major intersection with Brush Creek. So when we talk about major intersections, I see that as a major intersection.
Where do we talk about major intersections?
Up above, when we were talking about Carriageway and Snowmelt. Right here, Snowmass Mall between Daly and Albert Lane, or within the Snowmass Center. And then it goes on to talk about,
Well, on the main pedestrian level of the Snowmass Mall.
well, then there was something about the road as well.
One of their original suggestions was to have a buffer off of Brush Creek.
Here's,
And that suggestion would, didn't go forward. That might be what you're talking
if you
about.
look at the third bullet up from the bottom on that page,
Mhm.
no retail marijuana store can be located directly adjacent
Right.
to or visible from Brush Creek Road.
Or Carriageway. And I
Now-
want to say that, or Kearns Road.
Okay,
That's what I want to add.
hold that thought,
Okay,
okay? Because I had a question about what directly adjacent means, and where did that come from? Because I don't recall
that was it.
that we agreed to that.
Was that to Brush Creek Road?
No,
Or
Brush Creek, yeah, Brush Creek or Carriageway, what is directly?
Because
Because right here, it
Adjacent
was down
me.
here, we
it
did
was
agree to
me.
that.
I remember talking about it because I was concerned that there's places along Carriageway that could potentially become a shop. Like, other than in the mall, there's business entrances, and we talked about not being able to see it as you're coming up, like it not facing directly towards Carriageway as you're coming up Carriageway.
Well, we do, I think we do say that the signage can't be visible,
Yeah.
right? So that in and of itself would indicate to me that if you don't see a sign that there is a dispensary there, and it's just a storefront or a building front, that to me creates the appearance that you're trying to achieve when you say it's not directly visible, because there's nothing there that shows you, that indicates what it would be.
Were you talking about page, Ron?
page 31.
We discussed this about 6 weeks ago.
I honestly, I don't remember discussing this directly
Yes.
adjacent business.
I'm fine with the way it's worded.
I'm not. Because I think visible from those roads, okay, means to me that there's no visibility to the signage, and that presents a, if you will, protection to the public that a marijuana dispensary is not out right in front of their eyes.
Well, you can go,
And that's what you're trying to approve, that's what you're trying to achieve, I think. At least that's my interpretation.
but, Bob, within this, it says you could have a sign on a roof.
But it can't be visible from Brush Creek or Carriageway. So I don't care where the sign is, it can't be visible from those roads.
Okay, you could put a sign on a roof of a building, and you
Yeah.
could see it.
But then it wouldn't fit within
The
this.
question is where you're standing. You could put it on the roof, like where the old La Piñata used to be, and you could be coming down the steps and you could see a marijuana sign on top of a roof.
But that's not Brush
But
Creek
that-
or
But that's not
Carriageway.
Brush Creek Road
Right.
or,
That's on Carriageway.
well, if you could see it on the top of a roof while you're standing in Carriageway, then it would not be allowable. That's, because that's what
That's not what
that
it says.
says.
Yeah.
And, go ahead.
I don't know why we're fighting so hard about getting pot shops on Carriageway. We've already got 2 in the mall. We've already know there'd be a possibility of 1, given the distance of the center.
So if I can just clarify real quickly, I mean, we did discuss that, and I do think
Yes.
that the final code language would require a lot of fine tuning to better define that, because we did think about, like, if you're standing on Daly Lane looking across to Brush Creek Road, for example, that would be a bit challenging. But I think what we heard town council say was that the storefront itself couldn't be abutting those 2 main roads.
Right.
Or signage,
Yes.
in some cases, but
I-
although
I-
access could be from Brush Creek or Carriageway.
So my question to Bob is, and I agree with you about the directly adjacent, the 2 words, meaning if you're coming up Brush Creek Road, and for instance, if there happened to be a dispensary in the Conoco, that's directly adjacent to Brush Creek Road. So that does eliminate that particular zone.
And if you take Travis's definition, as he just spoke, that if the storefront is not directly visible from Brush Creek, right, then the storefront of the signage, then it doesn't matter. I mean, in other words,
I agree with you. I think the words directly adjacent should be taken out. You know, the visibility could stay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But the 2 words directly adjacent, to me, appear to be, you can't have it alongside Brush Creek
The
Road.
restriction on visibility is agreed to, but the physical location is what's up for discussion.
no, the language directly adjacent.
The two words that are in that 3rd bullet up.
If you go to the marijuana signs, displays, and advertisement section, which is the next page, it talks about signage and storefronts cannot be
Right.
visible from. That's a more restrictive, I mean, if you adopt that one, it's more restrictive than it is located, and you're arguing about.
Right.
But storefronts and signage cannot be visible from those roads.
So if we continue with Conoco as an example, the way I envisioned this was that their actual front door next to the pumps wouldn't be an option, but let's say like their entrance to the garage would be an option.
Yes.
Or the
Not
rear.
saying that,
The backside.
correct.
So the store,
I don't know how to word that here, and we would have to figure that out for the code, but
so you would see signage, if Conoco had a pot shop, you'd see signage from the road, because it'd be in their doorway as you come up Brush Creek. That's what you just said, right?
I don't think we would allow that as
Okay,
this is written.
Okay. Okay. What other questions do y'all have?
Yeah, well, I guess I just have a comment, more than a question. I'm aware that the state requires certain security, including certain monitoring, your video monitoring. I don't know how far the state regulations go on that subject, but I would like to see, I'd like, when you work on more of the detail of this, to get Brian's input, and, I mean, I think, a 24/7 in and outside monitoring with, video recording with some outside recording somewhere, to provide the greatest amount of security as possible. Because I think what we want to do is, we want to close as many loopholes, and we want to close all the loopholes as far as security is concerned. Because what we don't want
That's
is,
what's happened over in Aspen.
well, wherever it's happened, but I mean, what we don't want
Break-ins.
is a bunch of break-ins and other issues. And I'm sure the proprietors of these dispensaries don't want that either.
Would you like me to comment on what the state does require?
Sure, come on up.
Hi, Renee Grossman, 122 Little Elk Creek Avenue in Snowmass. The state requires that every entrance from the outside is covered on the outside and the inside. So every doorway is covered, every 20 feet has to be visible. From an owner's perspective, I can tell you every inch is visible on camera. It's all has to be stored on a special DVR that keeps the footage for at least 40 days, and you have the ability to download it, print it, share it with the law enforcement. In addition to that, as a business practice, I will tell you that everyone has motion sensors, usually glass break. We put security film on our windows. We have panic buttons. We establish a protocol with the police station, which is pretty common, so they know if a robbery is in place. It's 24/7 alarm system. And again, you establish a protocol. If the alarm company can't reach you, do they immediately dispatch or do they wait until they reach you? And so those are some business decisions. But the security is quite extensive. And I will just tell you on 3 occasions, we've actually been able to provide it to law enforcement to help with problems at neighboring businesses.
So that's pretty pricey in putting all that security in. Is there anything that you would advise from your experience that should be added in terms of security?
I really can't think of anything. I mean, I made a mistake one day and put too much money in an envelope, and I was able to actually see the denominations of the bills I was counting as I did this. So you really can see everything.
In reading through these regulations, are you seeing anything that we have missed?
Well, right now, what I've seen is you've mostly focused on your land use code. So I don't really see much else. Trying to think if there were extra things other towns asked for that went above and beyond the state. And I don't think so. The state, there's extensive labeling and packaging requirements. The local municipality, local law enforcement, state law enforcement has the right to inspect at any time. So they're pretty strong, the regulations. If anything, what we're seeing now is the states start to back off some. Now that the industry's maturing a little bit.
One of the areas that I really would like to figure out a way that someone from Utah can't come in here and buy a license. Or I'd love to see locals stay with locals.
I will tell you, the state has moved the other direction. In the beginning, you had to be a Colorado resident, then slowly but surely, they were allowing for outside owners, and a lot of us in the industry push for that because the capital is not in Colorado. So if you're going to raise capital to really do this, because now the businesses are large,
They're
well-established businesses. So the state now only requires, I think it's like 0.1%. Like there has to be a Colorado owner. Just in my opinion, I thought what John recommended with that liaison type person was probably.
That's as close as we can get, probably.
Well, it can't hurt. It would be a good idea.
And to that point, with our liquor licensees, our police officers have, I would say, great relationships with bar owners and operators, taverns, and all the licensees. And they are more than helpful in making sure that those liquor licensees are compliant. I'm sure you all know that the town actually puts on tips training and pays for it, so those people can come and do that. So our code doesn't require everyone to be tips trained, but that's what we strive for. And in a business like that, where it is not as stable as maybe other businesses in terms of who's actually pouring, it's a really good thing. And we have constant bar checks. Our officers go through at all times, and it's come through that kind of outreach that bar owners and operators appreciate. It's not a confrontational, typical police action. It's cooperative, and we envision that same thing. And if the council considers that liaison concept, we expect that to end up somewhat like how it does in our liquor. And it,
You ought to do it.
when you consider what happens in a resort, you know, we have our problems, but I would say that we do very well. We do very well with preventing some of the typical anticipated behaviors that go on in alcohol establishments. And this is a different beast too, because it's not consumption, it's simply purchase. So, but having a proactive relationship with the owners, and I don't know if this is the right term, but the shopkeepers / bud tenders, is probably a great way to go to keep it local. I mean, that concept of local ownership probably is not necessarily the way to go.
Would you be so kind to revisit that liaison concept that we began to discuss?
If you want it included, I mean, we'll draft
What would
the
that
language.
mean? What exactly would a liaison, what would be the requirements to be a liaison?
In some of the communities that we've gone through, for a license, it's kind of the same thing as a registered manager in a liquor site.
Okay.
That is the person that is the liaison. And what these other communities have done is that the shop nominates, appoints, and is recorded having a liaison for community issues that is not necessarily for violations, but, you know, hey, we're seeing loitering, or the neighborhoods complain about noise, whatever the issues are, and that liaison is the person that is reached out to, and that person is usually required to be local. So
To me, that makes some sense to put that in. What's the rest of you think? Because right now, we don't have any of that language in
Yeah,
here.
no, I think that,
I don't have a
that
problem
ought
with
to be in there.
Right.
How about the rest of you?
Yeah, I think, I'm fine with that. I think a community liaison would be beneficial.
and each licensee decides who that person is.
Okay.
And then they're registered on the license.
Can I ask a question about that, about licenses? I mean, I do support that concept that I had talked to John about, the liaison concept, but if a person, I mean, I don't know if this is legal or not legal, but can you limit, like if a person applies for a license for here in Snowmass Village and they already hold 10 other licenses, can you limit a person by the number of licenses they already hold?
You probably could. It could be easily attacked as arbitrary. And, you know, I don't understand, I guess, what you're trying to accomplish by
Well,
doing
no, it's
that.
just like going back to what Marky says about having local people. Like, let's say you have a local person that lives here and they want to open a business and they don't own any other businesses and they want to do it here because this is where they're from. And then you have like 3 other people that apply and they already own like 20 other businesses. Was
Gets
just
back to the
asking that
concept of
question.
those, big box stores, like when our Starbucks came in and kicked out.
Paradise Bakery.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, at Nantucket's been very successful in what they do. They limit.
So it was just a question.
And I can't tell you the answer because I don't know anybody that's done it. So I don't know experience-wise. I know the experience with completely limiting it to local ownership has not been successful and it's been problematic. Drawing a line somewhere in the sand by the number of licenses that you hold is something different in my mind, but if you believe that it would establish it, but how, just think of the situation of interlocking corporations and parents and subsidiaries. How do you get to who holds
Right,
the real license?
right. Well, that was the other thought I had, is that
It's problematic. But if you want it, we can give you an example of it.
Could you, this is so old, and I'm gonna tee off of what you're asking. Can we take a look at how well, it's Nantucket that has limited, the number of boxes. So if you own so many, let's use Starbucks, for example, and I hate to pick on, but you know, I personally would have loved to have seen our local guys survive, and I would have loved to see some of the clothing stores survive down on the mall. Instead, we wind up with nothing against Patagonia. Darn, it's just hard to see one more local go out of business. Can you figure some way around that we can limit the number of licenses that individual owns? Or is it?
Let me clarify something. When you say the number of licenses, you're referring to how many retail licenses they have, business license, or?
Retail license for marijuana.
Or dispensary licenses?
Retail license for recreational and medical marijuana.
Okay, so that's what
Yeah.
I'm understanding it, but I'm.
Yeah,
If
that's-
they have if they have a retail shop and they have a business license and they're selling clothes or shoes.
Yeah, that's a whole different business.
Exactly. But
Yes.
I just want to
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah. Because the money probably sitting in California. Unless Renee's got millions of dollars.
I was gonna say, or Greenwich.
Huh?
Nothing.
I don't know. It just, I know we all agree here, any way we can keep businesses local would be very helpful.
I have questions in regard to the sign, if we're ready to move on from that issue.
Well, I was about done with everything, other than the number. Okay, go for it.
On page 32.
Yep.
No sign shall contain additional logos, symbols, or other visual information depicting the promoting marijuana plants, marijuana products, marijuana use, or the marijuana industry. I think that the green cross has become, it's kind of the symbol of the industry, and it sounds to me like we're trying to eliminate the use of that particular symbol.
Yes,
would.
that's fair.
Yeah.
It would say
No green cross.
Maria's store. And you have to know it's in Maria's store, but that's exactly what this is aimed at.
Yeah. I'm not really, I think that that language is a little too restrictive. I mean, we do want people to know where these stores are and how to find them. I think there's a lot of businesses that use the marijuana leaf or, other references. And I just feel like that's a little too restrictive as far as marking the stores. How do you guys feel about that?
Well,
I
I'm
think
really
it's
trying to figure out what you mean.
Bill, if I understand you correctly, and I agree, I believe, if I understand you correctly, that I like, how are people gonna find these shops? How, we want a business to succeed.
Oh, you're down here.
But in the same token, we don't wanna hide it in the corner without a sign. Like, if it's just a blank storefront, how's anybody gonna know what's in there?
Yeah.
So, now, wait a minute. So this is, this one, no sign shall contain additional
Page
logos.
32.
I thought you're gonna have a green cross. That,
That's not the direction, this is your choice, but we were trying to say Maria's store, and that's what we thought the direction we were given was.
Yeah, we were following that original recommendation to be
Understandable,
inconspicuous. And I think we stole this from the town of
So,
Carbondale.
Marky, are you,
The town of what?
Carbondale.
Is that what Carbondale? I thought they had green
they
signs.
have green crosses.
Probably not a good,
No, they don't.
that's probably not a good example right now to talk about Carbondale signage.
So advertising next door and stuff.
Yeah. You know, I think what I'm hearing from Bill is, and what I've heard previously, is that you would like to not have differentiating logos, but if you had a uniform sign that indicated, and it could be a green cross, it could be a green leaf, but that each store would be allowed to employ one of those, and you could restrict the size.
The
and
size, right.
that you would allow a uniform identification for that spot.
I agree with
I
that.
think one of those, the question is a leaf or a cross?
I personally like the cross idea because there's, showing the leaf is more of marijuana as opposed to the product. possibly
I'm
the
very comfortable with the
CBDs or
green,
whatever else is there.
the green cross, because people have learned to differentiate the red cross from the green cross.
In America.
Huh? Well, when people see the red cross, they know that's medical.
Well, I
That's a
get it,
clinic
but
or a
if you go,
hospital.
if you go to Europe, the green cross means a pharmacy.
That's true.
That's why I said.
You're
in-
very right.
That's why I said in America.
So I think if you can adjust the language so that we can accommodate the kind of the universal symbol for the industry, I think that would be helpful.
What other comments do you have on?
I would use the word
I,
uniform, not
I guess I have a
universal.
question.
Uniform, yeah.
I have a question for John. John, I think we've talked about, well, I think we've talked about transferability or as one, one item that, or lack of transferability, as one item to help to protect the situation where someone is granted a license, but then, for whatever reasons, can't open, and ends up selling the license, you know, creating basically a windfall for themselves.
And I thought we discussed
Yes, we
that,
did.
that there were going to be time requirements for operation, otherwise a license would expire.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what, I just wanted to refresh what we had talked about. That's,
I believe we can
that
allow
takes
transfer
care of,
licensing.
that takes care of me.
That's in here.
Okay,
I didn't see anything in here that really addressed that.
okay.
If we don't have any,
Address transferring within that time
He
frame.
said we're not gonna allow it transfer, and I don't, you've netted something different.
Transfer,
so-
no.
I
At the
thought that was
expiration
in here
date,
that wasn't
provision is
transferable
in
without
there.
approval.
we'll have to discuss the transferability, but
Well-
I think it could be similar to liquor licenses, now that there's not gonna be a cap.
Yeah, if you kind of follow those liquor rules, that makes a lot of sense. If we don't have a lot of other things, could we assign the staff to start putting together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're there.
I think, I like the idea that we're moving forward.
It
Yep.
might be more efficient to do it that way and be talking about very clear black and white restrictions and regulations and scheme of a code than kind of not arguing, discussing these general concepts, because you'll then see what the fruits of the discussions we've had to date in an actual code format, and then getting down to wordsmithing that might be more efficient than.
I agree.
What about the licensing authority, part of it? I know there was some discussion of whether it should be handled like the alcohol with Rhonda, or whether it should have a separate entity that looks at it. We haven't really discussed that.
But what's your thinking on it?
Well, I mean, I feel like it could be fine handling it just like we do the alcohol. but we haven't talked about it at all.
Yeah, we used to have a liquor board, and then administratively, then we changed to Rhonda. When was that, John?
Oh, 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
But the judge has to follow, he is basically awarding the license, right? He has to follow the liquor licensing.
The judge is the hearing officer, so he's not a judge. He is our municipal judge, but he is acting as the hearing officer for the liquor licensing authority, and the only requirement is that he has a hearing for a new license.
Okay.
So what Rhonda does, and it's because the town's liquor industry is mature, is that it's mostly administrative stuff at this point, renewals, transfers, that kind of stuff. And we can certainly draft it such that any transfer would be treated as a new, until this industry reaches that kind of maturity, and it I don't want to say shakes out, but an equilibrium is kind of, rather than a gold rush, you could have that kind of mentality to begin with. And so everything would be heard by the hearing officer, and that would be the marijuana licensing hearing officer.
Okay.
And, that could be the municipal judge, or it could be someone else appointed to be that hearing officer. And then appeals, well, there's a provision in here, we didn't specify it, but I imagine that when the code language is actually written, that it would be appeals would go to you, the
Okay.
town council.
Makes sense.
So, but I think if you give us a bit of time to prepare this framework, I think you'll have more fruitful discussions after you've read it, understand how it works, rather than just a collection of concepts. There is some specificity in here, and you've addressed it, but actually seeing that, and when you get to that point, we'll also present to you the state regulations, so you understand how those regulations fit together with the local.
That makes sense, John. Is everybody fine with that?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm in
Yeah.
favor
Yes.
of moving forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you all.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you for coming tonight. And we'll allow staff to work on when we might see that, then we'll see that on a draft regulation or draft agenda. Okay, next item on the agenda. Does anybody need a break or everybody fine?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Almost there.
Right.
My paper's got all messed up, so we'll go over here. Okay, town council reports and actions. Discussion on town, well, I'll see if there's any reports first before I move into the next section. Any reports?
Yes,
Alyssa?
I have reports. Tom, do you have any?
Yeah.
We have a,
Bob sat in on the Northwest COG. I know he has some stuff to
Okay.
say.
You got any updates?
I don't really have any updates, other than we had a nice celebration of Bob Beatty last weekend. That was quite a cast of characters.
Where is my
And you were
Northwest?
one of them. I don't have anything to report today, other than we have a public health board meeting that I had to schedule for Thursday on an urgent issue involving, I don't want to say it all, but anyway, it's going to be interesting. State likes to have control. Okay.
Core and Clearer will have a meeting on Thursday.
Okay.
We'll discuss, the first part of the meeting will be Core's 25th anniversary, and in regards to what's going on from there, and I'll have more to report after that meeting.
Okay. So let me start off with the Northwest COG meeting last week. Primarily, there is there's a rule change before the Federal Communications Commission relative to the fees paid by the cable operators to local towns. And this rule change would change the way services that are now provided by the cable operators, such as educational channels and things like grassroots and so forth, change the way those services are looked at. And the change would make those services essentially in-kind donations, if you will, to the towns or to the municipalities. And therefore, they would be credited, or the value of those things would be credited against the fees that the cable companies now pay. So the bottom line is that municipalities would lose revenue, and in some cases, they could potentially lose all the revenue that they receive from the cable fees. So Northwest COG has put together a letter that would go to Senator Gardner, who happens to be on the committee, the Senate committee that is going to review these rule changes. And I've communicated that to Clint, and I believe that the information came from John Stavney at Northwest COG today, but I haven't had a chance to read it. So in the next day or so, I will get it over to Clint as well. And we'll look into that to see if we, as a council, would be interested in sending and signing on to this letter. So that's Northwest COG meeting. Then, what else do we have?
We went to an emergencies.
Then I had a RWAPA meeting at the end of November, where I learned that there's a lease was approved by the Colorado Water Board for this winter for Rudai Reservoir to add water into the frying pan and for the 15-mile reach for the purpose of preventing what's called anchor ice formation in the downriver flows, which anchor ice can form when the flows drop below 70 CFS, and anchor ice is harmful to young fish and their food sources. So this is a kind of an experimental lease to see if the fish population does better during the winter than they have in the past by slightly raising the flow. Additionally, at RWAPA, I'll remind everyone that maybe 3 years ago or thereabouts, RWAPA created a Roaring Fork Valley watershed plan. Yep. And now what's happened is that Healthy Rivers and Streams is working on making this watershed plan more user-friendly by creating a visual display. And what Healthy Rivers has been able to do is to take the state Colorado Basin map and remove the Roaring Fork Valley and then create the basis for extracting individual watersheds. So the Brush Creek watershed, the Frying Pan, the Roaring Fork, all of those can be separated out. And then the end use will be to show water projects that have been planned or have been completed. And again, it intends to be much more user-friendly than that multi-hundred-page manual that came out a few years ago. So that was RWAPA. Then Marky and I went to a Northwest COG workshop on disaster preparedness last Friday. And it was a very informative session. And rather than go into some of the details about it, I would just say that I guess that I'm going to suggest that the two of us sit down with Clint and maybe do a review and perhaps discuss or bring up some of the items that some of the questions we have, and then depending on the answers, some items that we might want to work towards in terms of disaster preparedness
And also resiliency.
and resiliency.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, the resiliency issue was
that's,
huge.
yeah, so I guess just to say that the four steps that we learned about were risk assessment, mitigation, recovery, and resiliency. And essentially, that is the flow pattern when, for disaster preparedness. So, I think that is all I have on that. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Tom? Oh, you did.
Oh,
Yeah, you
I've
did.
already been there.
We have a RAFTA board meeting Thursday morning as well. So moving on, town council appointments to outside boards, alternatives and alternates for 2019. And then a nomination and appointment of mayor pro tem. So let's start with the appointments.
And for tonight's discussion, what we kind of committed to was getting getting direction from you all, and we'll prepare the paperwork and the resolutions for a week for tonight. But we knew we wouldn't have a full council week from tonight, so that's tonight's discussion.
And if you'll note on page 39, you've got the current appointments. And then on page 40, I left a blank slate so that we can fill them in and then make it formal at the next meeting. I do have the designation of, that was for the representative for Northwest COG. It doesn't have a year on it, so I would imagine that if you wanted to change this, you could, because it doesn't really say a year. And I checked all the other paperwork, and it didn't say either, so.
I was going to suggest continuity on all of these, since everybody knows who we are.
No, absolutely.
You fine with continuity?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
do you want to go through them then, just so I make sure that I have them
Okay.
exactly?
Add the sister cities to this
It's not
official.
it's not an official board. It's not within our town charter and all that stuff. Would you put I wouldn't put Sister City on here, would you?
Are you a
Looking to
voting member?
John.
It's up to you.
No, we're not a voting member, but
Not
we're
a-
just
We're in the process, well, the plan is that Snowmass Village will become part of Sister City and that organization and have a formal board seat, correct?
yeah. But
At
we're
that-
just, that detail is, they're going through a lot of stuff. We're working on
So
it.
you might have some time.
Well, I think if that comes to fruition, that's when you make an official
Okay.
appointment.
Okay.
So for the RAFTA, we've got Markey, and then an alternate is Alyssa. For Root Eye Water and Power, we have Bob, and there's no alternate.
I'll be an alternate.
What a team player, Billy. So Nordic Council, we have Bill, but no alternate.
I'll be an alternate.
It only helps in case you have an emergency or somebody's out of town and, The entire council, of course, is on EOTC. Then Tom Good is appointment for the Corps. Do we want an alternate for Corps?
I'll be an alternate.
And Northwest COG is now Alyssa with Bob Circus as the alternate. Keep the same? Okay. CML, of course, is our town manager, is our rep there. And then we have Markey on the Public Health Board. Do you want an alternate for that?
You can't have another alternate because then it has to go through, the way the bylaws are just now getting formed. So the answer right now is no, only one rep from Snowmass.
Okay. And then just remember, next week, without a full council, the nomination for the mayor pro tem is usually a nomination and a second, and then you vote on it, so I'm not sure if you want to
Do we want to go ahead and take care of that?
You can.
Sure.
Who's, Does anyone want to nominate anyone for our mayor pro tem?
I'll nominate Bob Circus.
I'll second the nomination.
You know, you could have done this next week when I'm not here.
Well, that would have been
That would have
fair.
been very appropriate.
But it would have been appropriate, yeah.
He still might if you're not careful.
Any other suggestions, any other nominations? Okay, I'll close the nominations, all in support?
Aye.
Aye.
Boy, that was quick.
Okay, I'll have a revised schedule for you for the next meeting.
So I should say, congratulations.
Yeah, right.
Okay, discussion of potential council goal-setting process, Clint?
The last few, following the last few elections, the town council has set a formal goal-setting process. Madam Mayor brought it up to me maybe a week or 2 weeks back and said, hey, let's get something scheduled. So I wanted to get it on tonight's agenda just to see if we could set some dates when we might be here, assuming you want to go through a formal process. And then if you do, maybe get some ideas on how you'd want to tackle it, or we could talk to the process a bit later if you wanted to do that. But I wanted to just start the discussion with you all and ensure you wanted to do it. And if I included the existing goals, a few have been met, a few still need to go, so you might just say, let's keep working on those. But I think that's the kind of discussion we'd like to get going with the council, and so we can get some direction. I think the takeaway for you all, hopefully, is as staff, we heavily rely on these goals, and we set budgets towards them. We put lots of effort towards implementing them. So the more recent they are, the more accurate they are of council, the easier it is for us to implement.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to check in and see where we are, where the community is. And
You know, we have some, on the consent agenda, we have, January 7th and January 14th. I think I'd like to dedicate one of those I think the 14th is a work session or something?
Yeah, the 7th's a regular meeting, so you probably wouldn't want to do that.
Right,
the
so
14th.
maybe January 14th is a work session,
Could-
and,
Could we do it off-site and start earlier?
You can do whatever you all want.
4 o'clock, people are half brain dead by 5:30.
Yeah, start early.
Start do a luncheon somewhere, 12 to 4 or 1 to 4, 1 to 5?
I mean,
What's,
I was just looking at the clock after your comment.
12 to, I'm 10 minutes into brain dead, you mean?
I didn't say that, but
the last meeting, by the time we walked out, I think everybody was brain dead.
Do-
Oh, yeah, that was
That was
impossible.
too long, but, you're talking like almost a retreat, Marky?
Yeah, mini retreat,
Mini
several
retreat.
hours.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the issue around senior living, we haven't done anything on that.
That's true.
So we need to get on that one. And I'd really like to spend some time with my colleagues talking about how we might begin to crack that one.
So could we,
And- oh, and I'm sorry, the other thing-
If
Yeah.
we were to have that on the 14th, which is the Monday, if that was considered a work session,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to a 4 o'clock meeting of the work session, could we incorporate the
for
work
you?
session and the same goal setting at the same time?
No, starting at 1. So
Is
I
that-
think you still work. I'm looking at Mattson because he's busy into NASTAR.
Yeah.
I'll be done working, so.
Earlier in the day is not always great for me. Mondays are always a little hectic, being right after the weekend.
So what would be good for you,
Um,
perhaps that week or the following week?
How about if we start at 3?
but
Free
there's
to go to
nothing on
7.
the workshop.
Yeah, or whatever it takes.
Right.
Are we talking the 14th,
Yeah.
Bill?
You know that.
We could do it another day if that
Really
works
a
better for you.
retreat, but it can be. It's better to do it all
No,
right here.
I'll be into the season there. I tried to set my schedule up so I wouldn't miss a bunch of meetings, so I think I'm pretty good on that front.
Does that work? for everybody?
14th?
3 to
14th?
7?
3 to 7?
Yeah.
Anybody else traveling? Dresser, how about you? You around?
I mean, I have some thoughts for, somewhat slightly different. I mean, one concept that came to me recently as a result of a phone conversation was that, where I was asked about what the goal was of a particular board. And, you know, I think we ought to, if there's a lack of understanding between the boards and the commissions and the council, then maybe we need to have some joint meetings with the boards and commissions to talk about individual goals for those boards and commissions. So I don't know, that happened over the weekend.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. I mean, during this session, we should probably talk about each board and
Yes.
commission and see what our
Yeah,
goals for them.
exactly. See what we think they should be up to doing.
You bet.
And figure out if you
Or
want to
what
meet
they
with
are
them. or-
doing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
what they are doing, probably a good place to start.
So, does everybody agree on the 14th of January?
Yeah.
3 to 7 works? Before I put,
Yep.
hit the go button here, you know?
Haven't heard from Melissa.
Let's-
That's fine.
Okay.
And s-
Okay.
And so for, as far as facilitator, I mean, the last couple times, we just did it as our own group and sparked some discussion. We did a little, whatever the format was, but then we started identifying these types of topics like communications with boards and commissions, and you guys listed however many topics, and then we consolidated them down. We could do something like that again or go a different route.
I thought that worked very well. I think one of the things we might want to include in our conversation is resiliency and emergency preparedness.
And do you think at that time, Bob and Marky, you'd be able to share everything that you guys went over to
I'd be
Eagle County?
honored to do that. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest speakers we had on Friday was the town manager from Lyons, who went through the catastrophe of that whole flood mess that cut off everything, to include water and sanitation, electricity, all roads. So that, I learned, well, I took a lot of notes, let's put it that way, on that, because
We were made aware of certain booklets and
yeah.
other material available from the state, and we'll have time
We'll have
between
time to
now
do it,
and
yeah.
then to connect that up with Clint and
Staff.
hopefully have that stuff available.
It was very, you know, you never know what you don't know until you get into an emergency. So, it was good. Okay. Clint, any other questions on?
So we'll aim for 3 to 7 on January 14th. Televised or not televised?
I
I
don't
know
think it's necessary to televise
The
it.
eventual adoption of the goals?
Yes, that would
I
be
mean, obviously, we do
televised.
those at a formal council meeting. This is,
And I guess we're gonna do it here, or do we wanna do it offsite?
great thoughts always happen in here.
Yeah, I think this here is good.
Yeah.
Do you like that? That's good, huh?
I'll bring some cookies.
So far, so good, Clint.
I already have to get baking.
I just want to say thank you again to the town for a great party Friday night.
That was
for
great.
everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, that was
and,
first class.
Very nice, and also, as well as Marky said at the beginning, the invitation to most of the town people who had an opportunity to stay at the Limelight. It was nice to see the plaza and kind of soft opening type stuff, and looking forward to the regular season there. It looks like it's going to be vibrant.
Yeah, should be good.
Awesome. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. All in support?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Let the record show, 1 hour and 45 minutes.
unbelievable.
Well, it's
Great.
a special meeting. It was special because it was short.
Awesome.
I'm trying to make up for last week.
Right.
Did you take a week off to make up for last